Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always excited to delve into these stories.
Well, today we're heading to Ixtal.
Oh, Ixtal.
Yeah, Ixtal. A region,
Lush jungles.
yes, lush jungles, vibrant magic, and some pretty intense family drama.
Yeah, family drama is right.
We're going to be focusing on Tikras specifically.
Home of the Ixtal.
Right, the Ixtal, the ruling family.
Powerful elementalists.
Well,
Each one.
This deep dive is really about ambition, power, and the consequences that can come when those two things collide.
Absolutely. And the heart of it all is the conflict between two sisters, Qiyana and Mara.
Yeah, both powerful elementalist warriors, but with very different approaches to leadership. And those differences, well, let's just say they have some pretty big consequences.
You see that right away with Qiyana. She's incredibly skilled, not just with elemental magic, but with her Omlotl.
The Omlotl, for those who haven't had the pleasure, it's this unique Ixtali weapon.
Channels elemental magic.
Oh.
It's beautiful and deadly all at once.
And Qiyana wields it with such confidence. She genuinely believes she's the only one who can protect Ixtal from outsiders.
Which is a pretty bold claim. But then you see her in action, clearing a path to Tikras, effortlessly manipulating the jungle.
It's like watching nature bend to her will.
Exactly. A display of raw power. And then there's that scene in the plaza.
Oh, with the Piltovan mining machine.
That's the one. She encases that thing in ice, rock, vines, you name it. It's a statement, you know. Like she's saying, I'm the leader you need, the one who can handle these threats.
It's a powerful contrast to Mara, who we see arriving in a luxurious palanquin carried by servants.
Mara, she seems more focused on comfort, tradition, the old ways.
Maybe even a bit too much. I mean, it does make you wonder if her approach to leadership could have ever worked against a force like Piltover.
It's a good question. I mean, within Ixtali society, respect for the old ways is everything.
Right.
So in that context, Mara's focus on tradition might have been seen as a strength. But facing an aggressive, expansionist power like Piltover, well, perhaps a different approach was needed.
Qiyana certainly thought so. She repeatedly pushes Mara to step down, arguing that she's better equipped to defend Tikras. But Ixtali law favors the elder sibling when it comes to succession.
Yeah, so the elders back Mara, despite Qiyana's protests. It's this clash between tradition and individual ambition.
And it gets pretty messy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it. On one hand, you have tradition, stability, the wisdom of the past, and on the other, you have the drive for change, this belief that new approaches are needed to face new threats. It's a classic dilemma, and in this case, those forces are coming into direct conflict with potentially devastating consequences.
Qiyana's reaction to this whole thing is really telling. She's furious that the elders dismissed her, and in a moment of anger, she leaves the hidden path to Tikras exposed.
Reckless.
Completely reckless, right?
And with tragic consequences.
Yeah, it doesn't take long for the Piltovan miners to find the exposed path. They attack Tikras. It's brutal, it's chaotic, lots of death and destruction.
Mara, who Qiyana saw as weak, manages to escape, but she's completely traumatized by what happened.
It really underscores just how high the stakes were all along. And then there's Qiyana's reaction to the attack. On the surface, she's comforting Mara, putting on this act of concern. But underneath, there's this hint of satisfaction almost.
Like a sense of triumph.
Yeah, exactly. It's chilling. Does it suggest that she was somehow behind it all? Or is this just how she copes with the situation she feels she could have prevented?
I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely speaks to the moral ambiguity at the heart of her character. I mean, on one hand, she clearly believes she could have protected Tikras better than Mara. But her methods, and this reaction in particular, well, it suggests a dangerous belief. Like she's convinced that she alone knows what's best for Ixtal.
And then you have Mara, in her grief and desperation, begging Qiyana to take over as prefect, placing her trust in the very person who might have orchestrated this whole tragedy. It's heartbreaking.
It's tragic irony, isn't it? Qiyana finally achieves what she wanted, but at what cost? It really makes you question whether this victory is worth it at all. It makes you think about that, saying, be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Qiyana was so sure she was the only one who could save Tikras.
And yet,
Her action.
they directly led to its downfall.
Yeah.
It's tough because, on one hand, you can understand her frustration with Mara's leadership.
Especially with the Piltovans right there.
Yeah, the threat was real, but Qiyana's methods...
Ruthless. No other way to put it.
It makes you wonder, was there another way? Could this have been avoided? Could tradition and change, coexist?
That's what's so powerful about this story.
It really is.
It forces us to look at ambition, responsibility, means, and ends. Did Qiyana do the right thing? Was her rise to power inevitable?
Or did her choices create the very crisis she exploited? Big questions.
One thing that struck me, though, and maybe it was intentional, but we don't really get Piltover's perspective.
We see their aggression, their desire for resources, but why? What's driving them?
It's interesting, right? The sources focus on Ixtal's internal struggles.
Yeah.
Makes Piltover this faceless, almost antagonistic force.
Right.
Maybe it's meant to emphasize the internal divisions within Ixtal.
And how those divisions can be exploited by outside forces.
It also makes you think about power in general, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Is it always corrupting? Does it always come at a cost?
I mean, we see this throughout history, but this story gives it a new angle.
It's not just about individual ambition either.
No, it's systemic, too.
Like how Piltover, with its technology, encroaches on Ixtal.
It exploits its resources.
It's a classic tale of colonialism.
On dominance.
But there are echoes of that same dynamic within Ixtal as well.
Oh, interesting. How so?
The way the elders cling to tradition.
Yeah.
They refuse to acknowledge Qiyana's abilities, and it weakens them.
Makes them vulnerable.
It makes you wonder if it's a commentary on the dangers of blind adherence to the old ways.
Especially when facing new challenges.
Definitely makes you think.
It does. It really does. The elders, they mean well.
I think so.
But they fail to adapt.
And their rigidness contributes to the tragedy.
It's a cautionary tale for sure. Societies need to evolve.
To survive.
Exactly.
Now, Qiyana, she's in charge now.
She is.
But what kind of leader will she be? Will she be consumed by guilt? Or will she double down on her ruthless approach, convinced she was right all along?
That's where the source material leaves us hanging.
It does.
We see the start of her reign.
Right.
But the long-term consequences.
The impact on Tikraz and Ixtal.
All up in the air.
It's interesting to consider what might have happened if Mara had stayed in charge.
Yeah. With her focus on tradition and diplomacy, could she have protected Tikraz?
We'll never know, but her tragic end shows the danger of complacency.
And a failing to adapt.
To a changing world.
Yeah, it's tough.
So much to unpack.
So what can we take away from all of this? What does this deep dive tell us about ambition, leadership, and the choices we make when facing impossible odds?
I think it shows the importance of balance.
Balance.
Yeah. Qiyana's ambition was driven by a desire to protect Ixtal, but it led to destruction because it lacked balance.
I see.
She was so focused on her own vision that she didn't consider other perspectives.
Other approaches.
And Mara, while maybe too trusting, reminds us about tradition.
About preserving the values that bind a society together.
Progress shouldn't come at the cost of erasing the past.
I agree.
This story makes us look at our own beliefs about leadership.
Because...
What qualities matter to us? What sacrifices are we willing to make?
And how do we make sure our ambition serves the greater good?
You know, it really makes you think about other regions in Runeterra.
Yeah.
This clash between tradition and ambition, we've seen it in Demacia, Noxus. But how does Ixtal's approach to leadership and power differ?
Well, their connection to elemental magic adds a whole other layer to it.
Right.
It's not just about political power or military strength.
It's about harnessing the forces of nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leadership in Ixtal comes with a certain spiritual weight, a responsibility to maintain balance and harmony with the environment.
Which makes Qiyana even more interesting.
How so?
I mean, she's not just seeking control over people. She wants to control nature itself. Remember that scene where she's manipulating ice, rock, and vines?
Oh, yeah.
It shows her power, but it's also a reminder of the potential for destruction.
Absolutely. That duality is at the heart of Ixtali magic, isn't it? Sure. It can be used to nurture and protect, but also to dominate and control.
And that makes her mastery of the elements a little scary.
Yeah. Will she use it responsibly? Will she respect the balance of nature? Or will she be consumed by her ambition? It's a question that lingers.
It does, for sure.
Big question mark.
What about Mara, though? Was she just too passive?
Too bound by tradition.
Yeah, to be an effective leader.
It's tough to say. It's easy to judge in hindsight, right? Mara's focus on diplomacy and preserving Ixtali culture might have worked in a different time.
Against a different enemy.
Right. But against Piltover, maybe a more assertive approach was needed. The sad reminder that sometimes good intentions aren't enough.
No, they're not. So what can we take away from all of this? What does this story about Ixtal tell us about ambition, leadership, and the choices we make when things feel impossible?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is balance. Qiyana's ambition was driven by a desire to protect Ixtal.
Right.
But it led to destruction because it lacked balance.
It did.
She was so fixated on her own vision that she failed to consider other perspectives.
And Mara, while maybe too trusting, reminds us that tradition matters.
That preserving the values that hold a society together is important.
It's a reminder that progress shouldn't erase the past.
I like that. Progress shouldn't erase the past.
And ultimately, this story makes us examine our own beliefs about leadership.
It really does. What qualities do we admire? What sacrifices are we willing to make? And how can we make sure that our ambition serves the greater good?
That's a lot to think about.
It is.
And this deep dive into Ixtal has given us a glimpse into this world where magic, ambition, and tradition collide.
They do.
And it's a reminder that even when faced with impossible challenges,
There's always a choice.
a path to be forged.
And those choices shape our destinies and the fate of those around us.
Wow. Well said.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Ixtal. Let's see you next time. Keep exploring.